All right, guys, on this video today, we're going to be working on this 99 Suburban with the 6.5-liter diesel and a power steering leak. So if we look down here, I've got the lights pre-positioned for you. The complaint is that the reservoir was nearly empty during a recent oil change. What you can see is we've got a lot of fluid residue all over the top of this steering cover here. We've got a lot on this hose here. And then if we peel it back a little bit, hopefully there's enough light. If we move the wire loom back here, we've got a lot of soaking on this main hose. This is the hose that comes out from the steering gear here and goes up into the Hydroboost. This is the one I suspect is leaking, but we've got all this mess over here. And then if we look down towards the pump and we zoom in, we can see there's a lot of residue on the hose that's right in front of the screwdriver. Maybe this particular angle is not good. We'll maybe reshoot this in a minute on the other side. If we come, in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to come back on the other side and we'll show the other end of these hoses at the Hydroboost side. Okay. All right, guys, so up at the Hydroboost end, it's bone dry. All three of these hoses, we don't see anything but normal surface corrosion on the steel. If we follow them down to their crimp ends right here, we can see there's what looks like some old staining here and then some dampness on this hose here, but not a lot. And then really nothing on this hose. But then if we follow it down to the pump area, which is what I was trying to show you before, maybe in this view you can see it better, we've just got a lot of staining and wetness down in this area here of the hose that goes into the pump. Really can't find a good, there it is, yeah, that right there, right in front of where I'm moving the screwdriver is very wet. So when you get a problem like this where you can see, well, there's at least one hose that's leaking, and there might be more than one hose leaking, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to take a little rag here, clean rag, and I'm going to go down right through here. We can see, hopefully, it's a fight with the flashlight every time on this stuff. Right? And if I go down and I kind of hold this hose that's going from the steering gear to the Hydroboost, I can see that it is wet. So I can already condemn this hose, but I can't be sure that this hose is spraying the fluid down and getting this other hose wet. And I did have some wetness scrolling back over here on this hose here that might condemn that one as well, which is a different hose. So what do you do? Well, when you can't be making a good quick call like that, you can use a product like this. So this is an AC Delco 4-in-1 fluorescent dye. This is something that's used for power steering, engine oil. You could also use it for anything that's a petroleum-based product. You can't use it in the cooling system. They make a different product for the Dexcool, and they make a different product, obviously, for your AC refrigerant lines. You can't use it in brakes. Just in something like this, though, it's fine. It contains 1 ounce. 1 ounce is enough to do 8 quarts. So if we were trying to track down something in this 6.5-liter diesel, we dump the whole container in. But for this power steering setup, we're closer to 2 quarts. So I've gone ahead and I've marked off fourths on this guy. This is about where he comes up with 1 ounce. And so we're just going to use 1/4 of the container, and we're just going to pour that right in the reservoir of the power steering pump. And then we're going to get some brake clean down here and clean this all up. And then I'm going to show you what we do next to narrow down whether we have more than one hose leak. All right, guys, we're just finishing off adding this material, this dye. You can see it's kind of like an orange color. Make sure you don't get this stuff on your skin, right? All right, with that in there, 1/4 of the container, we can put our cover back on. And we've added some more power steering fluid as well. All right, now we'll get our flashlight out of here. What we're going to do is spray all these hoses down with some brake clean to get all that residue off. Let me do that, and then I'll show you the last step, and then we're going to take it for a test drive. All right, guys, so we've got everything brake cleaned off so that we can be sure when we put a UV light under here later, we can be sure to see the new leaks. And then what I've done on the one I already suspect is leaking, I've just wadded up a very thick set of a couple of towels, rags, zip tied them on here. What I want to do is I want to prevent any spray from falsely implicating one of these other hoses. I want to see if I actually get a UV hit on any of these other hoses when we take our test drive. So rather than firing the parts cannon, just randomly removing and replacing hoses, we're going to do this to confirm our diagnosis of this one hose being the culprit for all of this mess down here. So let's give it a test drive and see what happens. All right, guys, we ended up doing more than just a test drive on this. Ended up letting the owner drive the vehicle for a week, but we got what we wanted. So to show you what we're going to do next, I'm going to take one of my kits that I use for tracking down these leaks on air conditioning. We can use the same one for what we're doing here with this AC Delco die for the power steering. Now all these kits consist of is some protective yellow glasses. This both protects your eyes from the blue and violet light, as well as helps accentuate what the light is going to be exciting. And then we have a special UV type of flashlight. Now I've already put a piece of yellow cellophane on the front of this camera. That's probably why you notice it's got like a yellow tint to it, because just like with these glasses, it'll make it easier for the camera to see what we're doing. So let's get all set up and I'll show you what we found. All right, guys, we've got our protective goggles on. We've got our UV light ready. Just to show you what we're looking for, I'm going to go reach in and open up the dipstick on the reservoir. And then I'm going to turn our light on. And then you can see how, hopefully, it fluoresces a green-yellow color like a chartreuse. We zoom in on that. All right, so that's what we're looking for to indicate the leak. And if we take a look down what we did with our paper towel, I'm going to turn this light off here. If we zoom in on this, we already suspected this guy was leaking, and the reason I use this technique to wrap it is to catch it. You can see there's some fluorescing green spots. You know, I can't put the light right on it because this paper towel is blue, and so it reacts with the blue light. You guys can see up near the top here, right in this area, we can see that the fluorescing material is leaking through. As soon as we pop these two zip ties off, we're going to see there's a lot coming off that leak. Now, if we take a look down through here in the front, though, going into the cooler, you know, we'll see some reflectiveness of the aluminum. That's just a reaction of the metal. You got to look for that same kind of bright neon color. We don't see anything here. If we take a look on the top of the steering gear, though, we do see some bright yellow on the steering cover here, this plastic cover where the linkage goes in. And if we take a look at our reservoir, we don't see anything in the front. We don't see anything on this hose here. But what we're going to do is we're going to get a better view of this return hose on this side. So let's come around on a little bit closer on the other side here. And if I shine the light down through here, you can also see where it's exhibiting some leakage past the clamp on that return. So let's see how bright it really is here. So I'm going to take my UV light, turn it off, turn the regular light back on for a second, and we're going to reach down, we're going to pop these two zip ties. Now the reason I like this technique is if you know you've got one hose that's leaking, and if it's leaking a lot, it can end up splashing over everything. And so this can help you from having it splash over everything, condemning other hoses that don't really need to be condemned. All right, so take our two zip ties off, open up our little bandage here. We made this thick, you know, so that it wouldn't run off on anything. Now we turn our regular light off and we go back to our UV light. And you can see we just have a little bit of fluorescing right on the edge here of the paper towel. We don't actually have anything on the hose. So we know this hose that we thought was leaking is actually not where the leaks are coming from. All right, so we back up a little bit. Again, I'm trying to avoid the fact that this light just really reflects off of the blue paper. But if I just come in at an angle here, you can just see the spackling on the outside of this. And so what we've really got going on, if I just pull this all the way out, what we've really got going on for the leak is not the hose we thought, but this return over here. Our leak is coming from this return line, right down there. If we get a good angle where we can see that past these other hoses and zoom in. That's where it's the brightest yellow. And this is the one we're going to need to remove. So let's get started on this repair. All right, guys, and just to confirm it, I've reached my finger down here where we saw all that yellow on that return hose. And if I hold it up here in between these pipes, we can see it's fluorescing. So that's definitely the source of our leak. It's not what we thought. That was splash over from this return line. I'm not really sure how it's splashing over this badly, but the fact that we have the fluorescent dye nowhere but underneath this drain tells us that's the source of our leak. And so we're going to end up replacing that hose, like I said earlier. I just wanted to give you this other view. Let's go ahead and switch to the regular light so we can see how this hose... All right, guys, we got the yellow tape off the camera. We're back to normal vision. We're going to show you where this goes, right? So here's the line that goes to the power steering cooler. Here's the end of that rubber hose that's clamped on, that's leaking. Not leaking here, though, but leaking over at the pump. And then over at the pump end, if I come around on this side, right, that hose routes up to here, and then there's the other clamp, and then right there, let me switch the light a little bit, right down there is where we have our leak on the other side of this clamp. So that's the hose that we've got to replace, and that's an easy one, relatively speaking. It's going to be hard to get in there to get these clamps off, but at least we don't have to deal with anything with a fitting. So let me go ahead and figure out a good way to come in and clip these factory press-on clamps off so we can get that swapped out. And of course it's going to be really messy with that dye. So when you use that dye, it's great for helping zero in on stuff like this, but then you got to do extra prep so you don't get it all over everything. So let's get set up for that and then we'll continue. All right, guys, what I'm going to do here is just replace the leaking section. So this end of the hose that's leaking, the rubber hose, it's crimped on here with this factory type of crimp clamp. And there's actually a crimp clamp on both ends, but this is part of the power steering cooler assembly. If we actually follow this guy around, one end of it goes up into the steering gearbox, and the other end of it, as well as actually both ends really, curl down below into the frame rail. Let me show you what it looks like under the truck with that. All right, guys, here's a view underneath the vehicle. And these are your two power steering hard lines that are going into the frame rail. And they are secured by this one bolt up here. Looks like it might be a 15, maybe a 13, can't tell really for sure. And that is curled up inside this frame rail on this particular type. There's another type that gets by the radiator, but this is the more common type. I've looked inside here with a camera, and there's really no sign of rust on these hard lines. I'd have to take the front bumper off to replace the whole assembly if I went that route, and I'll give you the part number in the description if that's the route you want to take with this particular kind of problem. But the route I'm going to take is I'm just going to replace that particular length of rubber hose. So let's get started cutting those clamps. All right, guys, the tool I'm going to use to take those clamps off is just a standard Dremel with a cutoff wheel. I'm just using it on a flex shaft. That's just my choice. It's a little bit less bulky to have this than to have the actual tool down there. We're just going to go in there and cut that guy off. Make sure you wear eye protection for this step. And we're going to go down there, and we'll start with the one that's closest to the radiator. Now you just want to be careful that you don't cut anything but what you're in here to cut. All right, that's one. Now we're going to shift over to the other side. All right, guys, now that we got that cut, let's just get that clamp off and out of the way. And just like before, like I was mentioning, just like you want to have eye protection on if you're using a rotary tool like that. You also want to keep a little water pistol or something that you can use as a fire extinguisher if you need it. All right, so my visibility is kind of warped here so that the camera can see for you guys, so just bear with me a minute. I got a little Ziploc bag down here just to capture that fluid when it comes out. You know, it's not such a big deal with the power steering fluid itself, but with all that dye in there, it's a mess to clean up. All right, so now we got the clamp off. I'm going to come in here with a hose plier, and we're going to pull this guy off. And hopefully our little Ziploc bag will catch whatever runs out, and we'll have less of a cleanup job here. Okay, there we go. We're just going to let all this stuff run into that bag. And then what we'll end up doing is we'll end up repeating this process on the front side, and then we can take the hose out. And then I'll show you what we're replacing it with and the type of clamps that we're using. And then we'll be at a point where we're ready to test that we fixed this leak. So we're going to let her pee out here and we'll come back. All right, guys, let's get this other one off. So same routine. Let's take a pair of pliers on the cut clamp. And then we'll use some hose pliers to pull the hose off. And then just like last time, probably could have went with a smaller one, but we're just going to stick a bag under here to catch what might drip out, or what will drip out, as the case may be. And again, it's mostly just, you know, if this was just straight power steering fluid, I'd just let it go, and then we'd brake clean it up. But with this dye, brake clean will not get rid of it, surprisingly. So I'm under here. Let me go grab our cut clamps. Looks like this one had 2 on it at this end. That's the number 2. All right. Let's see if we can pull this hose off and get it cut and replaced. Might block your view for just a moment while I find a good place to grab this. I'll move the light manually for you. Just going to give it a twist to break it free. And then you can work on pulling it off. I need to step down to one size smaller. No, she's slipping. Let's go down here and use our hand for a second. It's just really hard and rigid. That's probably why it's leaking. Age got to it. Here we go. All right. So it looks like we got most of it out the other end. Okay, we'll let this run out for a little bit as well. You can see over here on the one we did earlier, I just capped it off just to stop the dripping. We pop up here outside the truck. You can see that we captured all of what came out of that side. So we haven't got any loss, no environmental damage. In fact, I'll just put that back in because it was fresh fluid with dye and it's not contaminated since we caught it. All right, let me pull this hose out and we'll show what we're replacing it with. All right, guys, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this kind of loom shield off. We're going to reuse that after we clean it up. And then what we're going to replace it with, if we look on the side here, it's not anything specific written down. This is not a separately serviceable part, so you're not going to find a part number or anything like that. But what we're looking for is to confirm it's 3/8 inch power steering return, right? Just the type of pipe that it is. And that's what we're going to replace it with. So the type of pipe that we're going to be using is a patch kit from Edelman, a 71350. And what's going to be in here is exactly that same type of hose. Supposed to be a Ziploc kind of bag, but maybe not. Looks like it was. I thought it was. Guess not. All right. Inside here, you will get a few feet of this hose, and you can pick this stuff up maybe locally. I'll put a link in the description for this, though, because I like to know what I'm getting, so when you buy something online, you can see what's actually in the picture. You know you're getting what you want. This comes with a little cap that you could have used to stop the leaking, like we used a little rubber one there. And what we see written on the side of this hose is what same thing we want to see, right? 3/8 inch power steering return. So if you go pick it up from the parts store, make sure that's what you see. This particular Edelman package has this AIT 3219 as the original supplier. So all we're going to do, no rocket science, guys, we're just going to line this up and find the most compatible bend route so that we can measure this out, right? Like that. And we're just going to cut that, and that's going to be our new return pipe. Now, another thing you could use, you could take a tape measure, right, and just kind of go exactly down there. What I'm going to use to cut it with is I'm just going to use one of these kind of deals here and just snip it off. So I'm going to go cut this. I'm going to go clean this up, get it put back together, and then we're going to get our clamps, and then we're going to get it reinstalled. All right, guys, so if we take a look at the clamps we took off, and again, you know, I'm not sure why the factory had two on that one end. There's only supposed to be one. But these types of clamps get crimped to hold on. So they're one-time use, right? So you have to cut them off the way we did. We're going to be replacing them with the same thing, because if you watch my channel for any length of time, you know I always go original GM all the way as long as it's available. So that's going to be a part 155 38 512. And all this guy is exact same thing that we just took off. Like that. And these get installed with the same kind of tool that you'd use with these types of clamps that are larger, that hold the boots onto the CV axles underneath on the four-wheel drive vehicles. Right, so you get underneath here, you grab this kind of a clamp with both sides of this particular tool. There's a little metal foot there that keeps pushing it down to keep it flat. And then you just give it a squeeze, or I'm not going to waste this one, right? But you just give it a squeeze. If you find you don't have the leverage, it's got a section in here where you can stick a 1/2-inch breaker bar and a 1/2-inch ratchet in here. And you can use that to get the leverage that you need. Some clamp usage in the service manual, actually I'll specify a torque value. So this is an Oetiker clamp. You can see right there on the side. You don't necessarily have to buy it directly from GM. So if we can get the camera to focus in on that. Not sure why he doesn't see it. But that's what it says, Oetiker, right on the side. Maybe because it's just kind of shiny. And then on the other side, it's marked 185. 185. All right, guys, we got our final clamp on down here, as you can see. Crimped nice and well, just like factory. We've taken her out for a test drive, and no leaks. And we've taken her off, the die, and made sure that we've got all that cleaned out. Let me show you what we use to do that. All right, guys, the product I like for cleaning up the die is this UV die cleaner that you can pick up at your local Napa store. You can probably pick it up online too. I find that it gets rid of all that mess a lot better than, you know, just trying to use like a standard degreaser or brake clean even. Not sure why, but it works great. And for topping off the fluid, what I like is this Prestone brand power steering fluid. There's a number of them that are in the same kind of colored container. And you want to make sure you're getting the one that is the 875723 type. That's the closest formulation to the original hydraulic fluid that was used in these GMT 400s. All right, so I hope this diagnosis taught you some things, helped you out, saved you some time, saved you some money. If it did, hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. And if you found that you ran into problems, you got questions, go ahead and leave a comment below, and I'll try to help out. Otherwise, thanks for watching.